Hi, this is Scott Cook. Welcome to Breaking Free from Churchianity. Today we're going to do an interview with Logan Barone. He is someone who wrote a book called The Mystery in You, and we're just going to talk to him a little bit about his own theological deconstruction and his experience with that, and maybe some points and tips to those of you who are beginning to do that in your own life. Maybe you're rethinking your theology, rethinking church. I'm going to be doing this more and more in the days ahead. Matter of fact, I've got several people already lined up beyond this. And because I think it's important to listen to other people, their journeys. Everybody's a little different, but there are things in other people's stories that you might be able to relate to. And in that process will help you in your own deconstruction, in your own rethinking of what does church really mean to me. Logan is a guy who is on Don Keathley's Facebook page. That's where I first saw some of his writings. He has a presence on Facebook as well as YouTube. He's got a YouTube channel that has a lot of videos there. I encourage you to go and check those out. But I just began listening to some of the things he was writing about his own journey, and I really found myself relating to Logan and some of the things that he was doing. We're all at different points in our journey, and so wherever you're at is where you're supposed to be. You're not. It's okay if you're a little further behind, if you're a little further ahead. Wherever you're at, that's where you're supposed to be at this time. And by listening to these, it can be an encouragement as you continue the process of deconstructing what you believe, re-looking at things from a wider lens, if you will. Part of breaking free from churchianity doesn't mean you're going to leave church, but what it does mean is you're going to leave institutional thinking, all right? You're going to leave this mindset of thinking the way people tell you to think. You're going to relook at your theology and realize, hey, I want to know what I believe and why I believe it, and it's okay not to believe what everyone at church believes. You don't have to. You can go to that church without believing what they believe. And here's the thing, if a church demands that you believe what they believe, that you buy into everything institutionally that they buy into, you don't need to be there. You need to go find another church. All you have to do is go to Paul's writings in Galatians and in Corinthians, 1 2 Corinthians, and you will see that there's absolute liberty and freedom in Christ Jesus to do what you want, to search these things and see what it is you're going to believe. Don't let someone else do that for you. Because if you do it, then in time, this ability to have an open mind will help you to grow spiritually. This is a part of spiritual growth, of maturity. So by listening to testimonies, listening to what other people have done, this is a part of us growing up spiritually. I'm not relying on the pastor. I listen to the pastor. I'm sure there's very good things that your pastor is saying. Listen, but do so with an open mind. Do so realizing that, hey, I may not come down on the same conclusions he does, and that's okay. You don't have to come back with the same conclusions the people at church did. You can come back with your own conclusions, and that's fine. You're okay. Let the Spirit lead you. You're on the journey. You'll get where you need to go. It's okay. So I look forward to this. Look forward to listening to Logan today, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm here with Logan Barone, and Logan has agreed to talk a little bit about his experience in deconstructing and reconstructing in regards to his theology, his understanding of church, and that sort of thing. And so I'm really happy to have Logan with us today. Some of you may know him from Don Keathley's group there on Facebook, and some of you may follow that group quite a bit. And he has quite a presence on social media. I encourage you to go out and look into that. As I started reading some of the posts that you had, Logan, I became very interested in your story. And so I was just kind of reading them and looking at that. It was just interesting how you were continuing in your process of deconstruction. But what I thought today is we kind of have a testimony of kind of how, this happened for you and kind of where you're at today. Because a lot of people who come to my program are doing this. They're going through deconstruction. And I think it's nice to bring people on periodically so that possibly be able to relate to some of the things you're going through and some of the things that you're working on. So if you don't mind, why don't you start out, just tell us a little bit of your background and your religious upbringing, and we'll just kind of go from there. Does that sound good?
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you, Scott, for having me on the show. And I've been looking forward to this conversation. So, yeah, to start, I was actually born and baptized Catholic. And so, yeah, that's early on. And everyone in my family was Catholic. So that's really all I knew for the first decade of my life. And then when I was around 11, my family left the Catholic Church, became Protestant, evangelical, and I was going to a Catholic school at the time. And then I left that school and I started going to, it was a Christian school, it just wasn't a Catholic school anymore. But during this time, I started to develop a passion for the Bible and theology and even like end times, like the whole idea of the rapture.
Mm.
fascinated me, and I wanted to
Right.
learn more about it. So I remember at like 11 or 12 years old, one of the first books I started to really study and read was the book of Revelation. And I was listening to all these end times preachers
Yeah.
on TV, and it just, yeah, it really fascinated me. And so like I said, I developed this passion for studying the Bible around 11 or 12, and then I go into high school, and I'm leading Bible studies, very involved at my church. And while I'm in high school, I'm starting to feel a call for ministry. And so by the time I'm a senior in high school, I decided that I wanted to go into ministry full time. And I took a year off in between high school and starting college. And so during that year, I was really involved with ministry and street evangelism. And I was preparing myself for college. And then a year later, I started a pastoral internship, and I enrolled at Oral Roberts University. Now, I wasn't on campus. I was a full-time online student.
Mm.
But that was the beginning of me thinking that, okay, this is the first step to me becoming a pastor. And so I started uh, with that. And then, like I said, I was on track to become a pastor. I was in ministry. But while I was in college, studying evangelical theology, I actually started to question a lot of it. And I started to question many of the different doctrines and teachings that I was taught, being raised evangelical and even Catholic.
Right.
And so this was a big deal for me, and I just had a lot of questions, and I didn't know what to do. But I always felt, even when I was a kid, even as I was learning the different doctrines of evangelicalism and the different core tenets of Christian fundamentalism, there were some teachings, some doctrines that just never really sat well with me. And so by the time I get to college, I'm starting to think critically. I'm starting to do my own research. And when I'm really examining these different teachings and doctrines, I'm remembering all throughout the years that, okay, even though I was taught this doctrine of original sin, even though I was taught this doctrine of eternal conscious torment, hell, and I was told I had to believe these things growing up, they never really resonated with me. They never really sat well with me, if I was being honest. And so, and I know you've experienced similar things, Scott, but like with,
Yeah.
with a lot of these doctrines, especially like hell, you're told that if you don't believe in hell, then you're going to hell, right? Because if you don't believe in hell, then you're not a real Christian. And if you're not a real Christian, then you're not saved. And if you're not saved, you're going to hell. And so I was believing all these things growing up because it was really out of fear, and I
Right.
didn't want to experience the divine punishment that I would apparently face if I didn't believe in these things, because I wanted to be a true Christian. So I don't know what it was, but when I got to college, I really started to see past all that. So I kind of got over the fear, and that enabled me to start doing my own research. And it took me probably 3 or 4 years, but by the time I was a senior, I had deconstructed really completely, uh, away from the doctrine of hell as eternal conscious torment. And I actually wrote my senior paper on that. And that was one of the first things I started to deconstruct.
Right.
Actually, that was the second thing. The first thing that I started to deconstruct, the first thing that I started to really just question, and I never really understood this, but it was the tithe, the teaching of the tithe. So the tithe is what really got me questioning, and started on the path of deconstruction. Then I got into this whole notion of hell,
Mm.
and from there it went from one thing to the next. And so after college, I started writing, because the paper that I wrote senior year led me to want to write more and more. So I started to develop a passion for writing. I started writing some poetry and blogs, and a lot of these writings after college were writings about my deconstruction. They were writings about new things I was learning about and studying. And
Yeah.
of course, they were a lot of writings about refuting this notion of hell that we were brought up with in Christianity as eternal punishment, eternal conscious torment. And so I'm getting into all this writing right after college. And all of a sudden, I was like, you know what? I think I should write a book, because I really love writing now. I'm spending hours every day writing these poems and blogs, and I'm just writing on my computer, and I don't really have an agenda of what I'm going to do with all the writing. I'm just writing because I felt
Right.
led this time to write. And eventually I got to the point where I said, you know what, I'm gonna turn some of this stuff into a book. So I did. And the book I wrote, The Mystery in You, Discovering God in the Deepest Part of Your Being,
Hmm.
was about it is about going within to experience God
Yeah.
instead of seeking and searching God externally. And so, the thing that I explain for myself in my journey was growing up in fundamentalism. It was all about, the focus was separation. So separation from God, separation from others, and from the separation consciousness were all these different beliefs being formed. And so when I started to move out of fundamentalism and I got into more of the mystical spirituality, I started to experience God in the place that I least expected, which was within me, within the depths of my being. And as it turns out, this wasn't some kind of new age idea, because if you read any of the ancient spiritual mystical texts, even outside of Christianity, outside the Bible, you learn about these mystics and sages and saints who are going within to experience God. So it's the complete opposite of having this expectation of God as this deity out there somewhere in the sky. And it's all about either God's presence coming down from heaven so that I can experience the presence of God on earth, or it's about me getting up into heaven someday to experience God. You move past that mindset and you enter into this experiential knowledge, this reality of, okay, God is beyond the finite mind. God is really ineffable, and God is infinite. So that you can't put God in a box. You can't say God is
Right.
just being, this mega being, this deity up there somewhere. And then you
Hmm.
realize that if that's the case, if God is infinite, then by definition, God is within the depths of your being. And
Right.
going within and experiencing God within is when true transformation starts to happen. And that's exactly what happened to me. I started going
Hmm.
within and I started practicing meditation and contemplative prayer. And through those methods, I started having incredible experiences of divine union. And this was during one of the hardest seasons of my life, walking away from fundamentalism, from the Christian community that I was so familiar with. When I did that, I lost a lot of friends and a lot of relationships that I'd built for years. And so I was alone. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to believe in anymore. Yet, what I'm telling you is I found God in the last place I would have expected, within my heart, within the depths of my being, and then experiencing that ineffable presence of love that was one with me is what ultimately produced the transformation in my life, and it has gotten me to where I am today.
Okay. All right. So, and we'll kind of go back a little bit. What was when you first started to come into this realization and began to do the real deconstruction work? Um, what was the initial pushback that did you get some initial pushback from people?
Of course, yeah, of course. I think a lot of it was, and I can relate to this because I was a part of this community, I was a part of this world. But basically, when you're in any kind of fundamentalist system, anything that is unknown or unfamiliar gets demonized and it gets labeled as dangerous. And there's
Right.
all these different terms, new age, they get
Yeah.
negative connotations, they get attached to anything outside what the group believes in. And so that's how the in group establishes itself, by
Right.
putting down the out group, any other out groups. So it's that us versus them mentality.
Right.
And so what I was experiencing when I left that was something that I already knew. I knew the pattern because I was on the other side of that. I was in the fundamentalist group. I was raised as a fundamentalist. And so I knew it all. And so once I started experiencing it from the outside, it wasn't a surprise to me. I kind of
Right.
expected. I knew as soon as I started to change my mind about these things that I believed in, as soon as I started teaching different theology, that I was going to receive this pushback. And, like I said, it was very difficult because I lost a lot of friends. I lost a lot of relationships that I built for many years. But, you know, I realized that the most important thing for me to do was to listen to my intuitive heart.
Mhm.
And I think the lesson I learned is, in life, we experience friends and relationships, and it's all seasonal. And so
Right.
sometimes people come into our lives and they stay for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And sometimes are longer than others, depending on the relationship, depending on the friend. And sometimes those that were in our lives for a particular reason, for a season, came into our lives with some kind of it was for a purpose. It was for, you know, our growth and development on the journey. But then there comes a point in time where some of the people that were in your life that were aiding you and helping you along the way, these people, these relationships can eventually become the very thing that hinders you from growing and transcending and developing. And so you have to learn to
Right.
let go. And that's just something I had to do. And I tried to, you know, I think there is a way to love from a distance and to consider these people. You can consider them friends. You know, they might not consider you friends, but you can still love them and consider them friends and wish the best for them. But at some point, you just got to let it go and you got to move on. And that's what I did. And so I knew that if I dwelled on it, there would be a lot of potential anger and unforgiveness that would
Right.
arise. And I knew that doing that again would only would only hinder me from moving on to this next season of my life that I'm in now.
Um, you said in college the first thing that you focused on, or one of the things, was tithing, but then hell. What caused you to start to focus on that theological belief? What was it that began to trigger some doubts?
On hell or on the
On,
tithe?
on hell. Let's do it. We'll do that with hell. The reason
Yeah.
is I what I find in my practice is that this is if someone can actually deal with this theological tenet and begin to deconstruct it. I think of the belief of hell as sort of what I call a tent pole belief. In other words, it's centered around, and everything sort of holds up around it.
Yeah.
And when this begins to be deconstructed, everything else begins to sort of fall with it. Because what I've found is most people, though they may not admit it, their greatest theological belief is hell,
Yeah.
because that's what's been pounded into them from the time that they were young. And it is really why do we send missionaries? We don't want people going to hell. Why do we witness? We don't want people going to hell. Why do
Right.
we give? So that we can send people, And so, in other words, it creates a mission, and it creates an urgency, and it creates a sense of us and them. And so when this starts to crumble, if you will, then it really begins to impact everything else. So what was it initially that kind of got you to reevaluate it?
Yeah, so I think for many people, when they grow up believing in hell, they end up really thinking about, just exactly what hell is and how horrific it is, and it just doesn't make sense, and it doesn't seem like it's justice. Like, how can punishment for sins committed, no matter what the sin is, for 70 to 80 years of a lifetime, be equal to eternal conscious torment? Right. And so those were definitely some of the things I was wrestling with early on, even when I was very fundamentalist and an evangelical. Those were things that would pop up in my mind, and I would kind of just like try not to think about them, try to
Right.
disregard them. But
Right.
I would say, yeah, I would say intuitively things like that started to arise, and I got to a point where I just couldn't keep ignoring that. Um, I couldn't just pretend like I wasn't having these thoughts of like how just ridiculous this whole notion of eternal punishment is. And so that was the first thing. And then the big thing for me was, um, you know, before I started deconstructing hell, I still believed in biblical inerrancy to a degree. I still
Right.
believed the Bible was the
Yeah.
univocal, inerrant, authoritative word of God. And so no
Yeah.
matter how ridiculous I thought eternal hell was, I knew I could not move past it until someone proved to me that it wasn't in the Bible.
Mm.
So I met someone who started challenging me on whether or not hell, at least the Christian version of hell, can be found in the Bible. And when I first heard this argument, I was like, this is no argument, because I can show you, I can open up my Bible, I can show you all the places that hell is in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And
Right.
Jesus taught more about hell than anyone else in the Bible. So
Right.
I was programmed to defend the notion of hell. And I would do that. But then, like I said, I met someone that started challenging me on this topic. And during this was during college. Like I said, I started doing the biblical study, trying to examine whether or not hell was in the Bible. And what I found was that it absolutely is not in the Bible, at least the notion of hell that is preached today in
Mm.
Christianity. So yeah, doing the study, the biblical study, going through, the 4 words that have been translated to the English word hell, and then, learning about the early church belief of universal restoration. There were so many factors like that when I was honest with myself and I started to, like I said, research for myself, I couldn't help but um, uh, go with what I was learning about. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't pretend like it wasn't there.
Right.
And one thing led to the next from that point on.
Okay. All right. Now, how did we talked a little bit about Christians and that sort of thing. How has this impacted family and people you're close to?
Yeah, so I mean, believe it or not, my family, as far as my immediate family goes, they've been very supportive, and I haven't really received any pushback from them.
Okay.
So, I've been blessed. My parents, both my parents, I'd say, are very open-minded, and they have their opinions, they have their perspectives, they have their beliefs. But we've had many fruitful conversations of discussing what I believe now, why I believe it,
Right.
and in these conversations, I'm not trying to change their minds. I'm not trying to convince them. I'm just sharing why I believe what I believe now. And I think that for some of it, not all of it, but for some of it, they're starting to consider and they're starting to be more open to, because like I said, they are open-minded people and they're not like super dogmatic by any means, which is a
Yeah.
blessing.
Okay.
So yeah, I really haven't had a tremendous amount of pushback from any kind of family members. It was more friends, people that I was in ministry with, and people in my Christian community that I
Okay.
really grew up with. Yeah.
All right. I think sometimes that's the biggest fear people have is their community, their tribe, if
Yeah.
you will. Uh, and you are
Yeah.
married, but you don't have any children, isn't that right?
Yes, I'm married, but I have no
Yeah,
children.
you have no kids. So it's a little different, I guess, for some folks. It depends on, how long you've been somewhere or where, if you've got 3 or 4 children and you're like, hey, I'm doing this, deconstruction, so much is changing. I'm not sure what I believe, which is kind of where I have been. I wasn't sure what I believe. I mean, the whole thing got torn down. And so, but then when I was doing this, I was older. I wish I'd been your age. I did this. It would have been so much better. But my time was my time, and so my kids were older. But for someone who's in a church situation where they've got 3 or 4 kids, maybe elementary, high school, it can be difficult because of the potential consequences
Right.
if they come out uh, and really share where they're
Right.
at and what
Right.
they think, not just to themselves, but to their family members, to their wife. Matter of fact, when
Yeah.
I first told my wife I no longer believed in hell as I had been taught it, man, she was not happy. I mean, I got pushback, and for about a year, and we were in our 50s then, and so that was a little bit, and had been married about 15 years, and that was kind of for her out of left field, although I'd been working in me for a long time. And so
Yeah.
it's one of those things that a lot of these changes you're going through, there are seasons of time you begin to realize, okay, I've got to let go of that.
Right.
Um, Talk about that. Was it hard for you to let go of some things, let go of some friendships, or was it just sort of to you more of a natural process?
I'd say it was, both. It was natural, definitely something that felt like it was time to move on, but it was also very difficult. So, like I said, that was during my journey going through the dark night of the soul season.
Yeah.
That was the hardest part, was letting go of so many of these friendships. So many, I mean, for the most part, when you think about it, our relationships, the people in our lives, really are a part of who we are. And so it can
Right.
kind of feel like you're losing a part of yourself when
Yeah.
you lose these lifelong relationships. And then I think the hardest part is, not only losing friends and these lifelong relationships, but then to have them, have this horrible view of you now as you're possessed by the devil and you're leading
Right.
people astray and you're leading people to hell and you're a heretic. And to hear that is just heartbreaking. And I think um, the thing that I don't understand now is, why can't we just have different opinions? Why can't we just have different views?
Right.
Why does it
Yeah.
have to be you're right, I'm wrong, I'm, a heretic, you're the one that has it all figured out, you've got the orthodox, like why the us versus them mentality? But that's part of it, I mean, that's for the fundamentalist groups, that tends to be the mindset, that tends to be the view. It's we have the one and only truth, our group. And if you don't believe like us, then not only are you wrong, but you are a heretic. You are a false teacher. You are possessed by the devil and you're leading people astray and you're going to have to face some
Right.
serious divine punishment for that. So that's the hardest part is having to deal with that. And to be honest, I don't deal with it. Like I ignore it. When it gets to that point, I have to walk away. There's nothing to say at that point.
Right.
So
It seems to me as though arguing, I've really gotten to the point I don't argue with people. I, that sometimes people don't like that. They want, but the truth is you're not going to change anyone's mind by arguing with
right.
them. And the reality is that they are where they're supposed to be and I am where I'm supposed to be. And,
Yeah.
and that frustrates people too. But we're in fundamentalism, we're really taught, hey, everybody has to get on board. Everybody has to be at the same place. We all have to agree and believe this. And we sign confessions of faith, belief statements and things of that nature, just so that
Yeah.
everybody believes the same thing. But the reality is that's really not feasible because everyone's growing and changing and things are going to, some people are going to see things differently. I can remember when I really started going through this, I got to the point I wasn't sure what I believed. I wasn't even sure what I believed about Jesus for that matter. What I really
Yeah.
began to realize was I am a spiritual being
Hmm.
above all. I'm a spirit soul. My essence is spirit. I'm an early energy being, if I were to be honest with that. That's who I am. And that's my essence. And to know myself, then I need to go inward. I'm not going to find it outward.
Right.
I have to go into that true person that I am. Certainly, I'm one with the divine life, but at the same time, to find myself, I'm not going to do that in religion. It's just not going to happen.